welcome to another episode of the Hot Rod Pod, where it all began, presented by Mecum Auctions. Brian Lohnes, joined here by not only the editor of Hot Rod Magazine, John McGann, but also Matt Avery, executive producer for Mecum Auctions. We're here to talk about a bunch of different auction-related topics today, but first off, have you seen anything cool at PRI so far?
So much cool stuff, Brian. And I think one of the coolest thing I've seen is this race car that's hanging over the entrance, kind of letting people know this is another level show. This isn't your average trade show.
John, how about you? You've been scoping everything out in there or what?
Yeah, scoping everything out, and lots of transitions, but in the industry right now. But we're still here.
There's a lot of good hardcore race car parts still happening.
Yes, exactly.
You can almost cut the horsepower with a knife, Brian.
Yes.
I think that's how I would say walking around the halls here. It's tangible.
It's leaking out of the walls. It's permeating the carpets. It's everywhere.
It really is. It really is.
So we're going to talk auctions, and we're going to talk Mecum. You have a huge Kissimmee auction that's coming up. But I think one of the things I'm really interested in, and I think maybe the audience is curious about, I want to dispel some rumors. I want to go a little bit down the rabbit hole of the auction rumors, the auction myths that we can kind of dispel, and you certainly have heard probably all of them so far.
That's a great place to start because there really is a lot out there that people don't know about Mecum Auctions. I think a great place to start, Brian, is the fact that you don't have to be a bidder to come to an auction. And, certainly that's a lot of the people that are coming are people that are bidding or selling cars, but we have spectator day passes. It really makes a great, wonderful outing with friends or family to come. Again, you don't have to bid. You don't have to worry about raising your hand at the wrong time. You can come and take in, I think, one of the best car shows on the planet.
My first Mecum experience was actually here in Indianapolis in 2020. So I'd never been to a Mecum auction before. When the NHRA season started back up, we raced almost exclusively at Lucas Oil Indianapolis Raceway Park. Well, we had an off couple of days between events, and you guys were having your big auction here. And I went with Tony Pedregon, and as many of these as I've watched on television, it was freaking awesome. It was legitimately awesome. We were there early in the week, which I think is like myth number one. We were there on one of the days where these were exceptionally reasonable cars that were being sold. I mean, they were like, there was actually a Willys Jeep that I threw another guy, that was his buddy with a bidder pass. I'm like, I want the Jeep. Now, I never bid at an auction. I'm like, this is awesome. And then I lost the Jeep because I was not fast enough on my feet. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about kind of the arc of a normal Mecum auction and the fact that there is tons of reasonable buys and deals available.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that that's probably myth number two, that everything that crosses the auction block is unattainable, right? Where obviously those are the cars and vehicles and that make headlines, seven-figure sales, et cetera. Of course, that gets people excited.
It's the stuff John bids on.
It's the stuff that John
every day.
Exactly right. But for those who are not John, but I would say that there's a lot of people that if you are looking for a collector car, an auction can be a great place to find, like you identified, a deal where not everything is a high seller. And I know a lot of people might, kind of question, well, then how does an auction work? And I think it's one of those where it's like, there's room for everything. Everything will cross the block. Again, there's a lot of high sellers, but if you do come out on some of the early days, or even on some of the other days that there's a little bit more attention, you can still find deals. You can still find affordable vehicles. And that's a great place for those who want to get into the hobby and find their first collector car.
And I think the larger point on that, John, too, is like you can actually look at these things, touch them and climb around them and climb under them and see what's going on. So as many times as people buy cars on the internet sight unseen, this is not that experience.
Not that experience. And I did some checking on your website too. You can fully inspect all the cars ahead of time. They're all there for people, prospective buyers to look at and look over. So that's a huge plus because then you know what you're getting.
Yeah, and I think that's another great myth to dispel is the fact that that you only see the car when it crosses the block, and of course that's not the case. For a lot of the collector vehicles, a lot of the interested parties have been looking at these websites, at these vehicles for in some cases weeks and even months as they're up on our website planning for the vehicle. They're finding out more about it. We try to present all the information that we have about the consignments, and then certainly when the vehicles are on site, we encourage people. Come early, go out through the lots. I say bring a flashlight, depending on how serious you are in the vehicle. As you pop the hood, again, we try to present the cars in the best possible way for people to get a full inspection of the cars. They're all usually unlocked, or if they're not, you can work with one of our lot managers just because we do try to keep a hand on that. But,
sure, you don't want everybody.
You don't want everyone. But I will say,
Yeah.
If you are interested and you are serious, we will allow you to take a close look at what you want so that when the car crosses the block. And I have heard that before. You know, a lot of people are surprised. They're like, I'm really surprised that people that excited to bid on a car they've only seen as it crosses the block. I'm like,
no.
oh, no.
No.
They've been watching this for a while. And, you know, something else, guys, that is important to note is that when you do come out, and if you don't register as a bidder, let's just say you want to bring the family, come out with some friends, when you're on site, we have an office on site to help people upgrade your ticket from a day pass to become a bidder. We can get those balls in motion. So if you do come and you're saying, hey, I'm not going to buy anything, but you're there, you fall in love with something, and right on site, we can help get you getting a bidder's pass.
Yeah, I was legitimately blown away by the number of driver quality cars that were going for $10,000 or less. And it was like, damn. I mean, I figured it happened, but I had never really witnessed it in person. And it was fun because there was a lot of excitement around those cars, too. I mean, there was clearly people that showed up to bid on whatever C10 that was rolling across or whatever, like fairly, what I guess we would consider almost a mundane vehicle.
Sure.
But they were there to buy that thing, and they were not going to leave without it. And you get swept up in the whole thing. And even though we were early in the week, it still does have a great energy.
It really does. And, you know, a lot of the vehicles that we sell are collector grade. Obviously, that's what drives a lot of the hobby. But that being said, we still see a lot of customers bringing vehicles to us that I think would fall into that entry-level category, that driver category. You know, I think one of the other myths, guys, that people have is the definition of collector car. You know, a lot of people think chrome, fins, white walls. All of that is true. However, you got to realize that collector car is up to the individual and what they have an emotional connection with. And what we're seeing from our space is that category is widening. Particularly as younger collectors coming into the hobby are wanting to chase down the cars of their youth. So we're starting to see that definition of what a collector car is continue to expand, and it certainly is the 50s fins and chrome, the 60s muscle, but we're also seeing European exotics. We're seeing just all kinds of stuff. So.
Yeah, and I think, John, we almost see a reflection of that. We see the reflection of that trend in shows like PRI and SEMA to a degree. Like when we were walking around doing our after-hours stuff at SEMA, Matt, you were there too. Like the explosion of Grand Nationals this year. It's like, and not that those cars haven't always been cool, but now all of a sudden those cars have become like in the wheelhouse. And if people are building them that way, then they're also looking to collect them. Absolutely.
And you know, I was looking over the consignments. You mentioned that our largest auction is coming up, Mecum Kissimmee, in January. We're approaching, guys, almost 5,000 vehicles crossing the block.
Wow.
But I will say we've got so many great collections coming, and one in particular I think represents this trend where it's mostly Fox body in SN95, and then also some of the SHO Tauruses from that era. And
that's cool.
You know, so for us to see a collection like that put together means it's been years in the making. So the reason I bring that up is, again, that's an indicator of the trends shifting, where collectors have been amassing these for years, and now they're starting to bring them to the market, just showing how we're seeing new entries into what people think is cool.
We talked about that a little bit at the SEMA show too, about the Grand Nationals and the G-bodies, and I remember hearing something recently about a Volkswagen Scirocco at an auction site that was like, sold for a lot of money, and you wouldn't think. I remember those things driving around, but in hindsight, they're cool cars that
I got two sons in their late teens, right? And my oldest boy, his daily driver's it's a '98 Mercedes E320 that he and I fixed up, and the things we lowered. It's a cruiser, and then my youngest son just bought a 03 Mercury Marauder.
Nice.
And so but these are kind of hot rodding cars to them. To my youngest son, that Marauder is like the last of the muscle cars. It's a full frame rear wheel drive V8 car, and for him, that's going to stick with him. Like we talk about how the generations stick, he's going to be in love with those forever. So 20 years from now, and he's long sold his and wants one back, he's the guy that'll be at the auction.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm waiting for the day, guys. We're going to start seeing numbers matching Civic SIs come to auction.
You're right.
Crazy.
You're right.
We really are, and I'm not saying that in jest. I'm just saying that indicates how wide we, again, this definition of collector car is expanding, and it's just one of those where, again, muscle cars will always be a perennial favorite. I think what I refer to them as, they will always be considered blue chip collectibles, right? Boss 428s, your Copo Camaros, all that stuff. I don't think it will ever fall out of fashion with collectors, even younger collectors that don't have that firsthand experience with that vehicle when it was new on the streets, which I'm convinced drives the majority of collecting, right? just like your son. I mean, I'm guessing he wanted that Marauder probably because he remembers seeing the aggressive marketing that that they had for just how it was presented as a bad boy car, which was awesome, and it stuck with it.
Yeah.
So I think that that's what we're going to see. And even for people that, again, weren't there in the 1960s or 70s or 80s to see some of these legendary muscle cars prowling the streets, they're always going to be collectible. But they're also going to want other cars, and that's exciting for me.
So in those terms, how does Mecum maintain a presence with everybody to a degree, right? Because you don't want to pigeonhole yourself as we're just the guys that sell the muscle cars. We're just the guys that sell the resto mods. You want to be a company that the younger collector, the younger buyer wants to find that matching number Civic Si. So I guess that's the job of Mecum, to maintain that wide net.
That's a great point and great question, Brian. And Mecum Auctions, we always try to stay ahead of the curve and to see where the space is going. And we also, you're going to see a lot more in 2025 as we're going to be out and about at even more events.
Nice.
Reaching out and connecting with enthusiasts. I would even say non-traditional events, just to broadcast what Mecum has to offer. And I think something else that's important to note is that Mecum Auctions, auctions is in our title, of course, but when you come out to one of our events, there's a whole lot more than just the auction process to see and do. And then likewise, from a presentation standpoint, we offer a lot more than just the buying and selling of the car. We have a whole finance team, Mecum Financial Services, so that we can provide, as we like to say, we can add some horsepower to the bidding.
There you go.
Of people when they come out on site. And we also offer Mecum Transport. So again, I mean, it's just, we try to offer a one-stop shop to help enthusiasts acquire that car of their dreams, so that, if they say, hey, I bought this car, but I don't know how to get it home, they can stop by, talk to some of our transport logistics experts, and get it on a truck and get it sent to them. And all these services are great to help keep the hobby going.
I saw on your website you offer financing up to $3 million, if I remember that correctly. So that
I knew John was a seven-figure bidder.
I told you, this is the guy.
get me in a lot of trouble.
This is the guy.
Could buy a lot of Marauders.
You could buy the whole national supply of them for that much money.
I wouldn't mind that, though.
But then also, too, I think also even some of the way that, again, when a car gets consigned and when you start to work with a consignment agent as a customer, we also offer a whole suite of presentation services, from photography to helping create the listings to make sure it's accurate, that it reflects the vehicle and any provenance to it. We really want to do our best to help connect buyers and sellers in all ways possible.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me, just because everybody looks at cars in a slightly different way. There are the people that look at them and they want the most pristine example of a 57 Chevy that exists on the planet, down to the correct hose clamps and everything else. And there are people that want the opposite end of that. They want a custom-built car that is affected with every modern kind of stylistic and technological touch. And the fact that you've been able to appeal to all of those people goes back to what you just talked about, meaning that if the idea was just to make this presentation of a bone stock 57 Chevy the same as a fully customized 57 Chevy, that doesn't work. So you guys actually tailor it to the customer.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, that's not to be confused with overselling. I mean, I think it's just one of those of working with the owner to say, hey, what are the attributes of your vehicle that would matter to a prospective new owner? Again, it's not overhyped, but it's just saying, like, hey, has the car won any awards? Has it been featured in any publications? That type of stuff. Or again, if it's pulled out of a barn and just so if it was
saved,
if it was saved, just saying, hey, can we help you look to see if maybe it is a unique color combination? Just things that matter to collectors. And again, just in the way of trying to provide all the information that we have about those vehicles, so that buyers can make a smart, educated purchase.
I think one of the things that comes through when you check out the listings, and I was looking through the Kissimmee stuff just the other day, is the way that the cars are described and the way they're written up is it speaks to an enthusiast. It has a genuine nature to it. It's not some like AI bot just spitting stuff out. And I think that's important, because your business and reputation is based on being authentic and honest with the buyer, right? And so if I'm somebody who clearly has a taste for something I'm going to look for, and you describe it to me in a way that speaks to me, I'm way more likely to go there and invest my time and money potentially in the car.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we have a fantastic team, both in-house, and then we also work with some of the top writers around the country that have specialties with some of the with certain niches within the automotive space that do help create those catalog stories or spotlights or even going through the bullets and making sure you get the bullets when you look at the consignment page. page. Those are the ones that obviously come up on top, kind of the main elements to make sure that they're accurate. I mean, we are constantly reviewing those. We're also making sure that consigners don't maybe over-exaggerate or help to just bring it down to what it really reflects that vehicle and what would matter to a new owner.
You've got your Kissimmee auction starting in second week of January, so I'd imagine there's a whole lot of work ahead of time. So, like from the process of starting, where does that process start? Like, do people approach you? How do you decide which cars go to which auctions? Do people specifically say, I would like mine to be sold at Kissimmee or Indianapolis, or how's that begin? And then, like, how far ahead? Like, you're probably way into the process of planning this auction right now.
No, well, we start next week, John. No.
Sounds like magazine production.
You wouldn't believe it. Yeah.
Sounds like magazine
No.
production.
Great, all great questions, and I really I'll start from an internal team perspective. With Kissimmee being our flagship event, but with us also having a robust calendar of events around the country and around the year, I will say, so we're always working on those events, but particularly with Kissimmee, because of the size, the scope, and the scale, we're kind of we never have a break. We're always thinking about either the one coming up, or if we just come out of it, there's even still some dialogue and conversation, even in the weeks and months after January when we hold it. Even as we're doing other top-tier events, we're still in the back of our mind saying, hey, what can we do to make next year better, bigger, more attractive to prospective customers? So particularly, I would say we obviously hit high gear probably summer for the upcoming Kissimmee event.
Wow. Yeah.
Just to start getting things in motion. It does help that events like Kissimmee have been in play for so many years. I believe last year, I think, was our 20th anniversary of Kissimmee, or recently it was. So I would never use the word turnkey.
No.
That makes it sound a little too like, oh, it just happens. It's never turnkey, but it certainly helps that it's a ball that's already in motion, so that, again, the bulk of what we do there. But I've been in talks even with some of our team in the last week or two about how we're doing some things different with the layout, or how we're going to move some things over here. I mean, we're always constantly reevaluating, but it does help that we're not trying to launch that type of event from scratch, again, but never turnkey. Now, from a consignment standpoint, we certainly encourage prospective customers that if they are going to sell with us, the earlier that they alert us, the better it works for everyone. It's usually a couple months before the auction is when we will start putting the word out for consignments and actively starting to seek those out. But the reason I bring that up, John, is for a couple of reasons. We will accept cars, consignments up until the day of or when the gates are open.
Wow.
We will accept cars. And I mean, we still have a check-in process, and again, but some people do that. So there's different reasons. Maybe last-minute decision. What I recommend to people is you can do that, no problem. But it also works better to give us more heads up. So that you get maximum exposure and you take advantage of our fantastic website and the presentation, all that stuff, because we have customers and eager participants, and the automotive, I think to a certain extent, the news community is looking at upcoming consignments to say, oh, hey, did you know Mecum had this crazy car consigned? So I will say the earlier that a customer can alert our consignment team, the better. It works out better. Again, we will accept up until the day of, or even weeks of. The exact date, I don't know offhand, but I would say a couple months before each auction is when it's a good time to have a conversation. Following up on another question you asked about how do consignments go or recommended to different locations. A lot of that, of course, is driven by the location of the consignor. Certainly, again, looking at markets that they're in, and do we have an auction for that? Beyond that, sometimes it comes down to suggesting other markets based on trends that we're seeing. So I think one of the most obvious would be is if you're bringing a top-tier truck, it's hard to beat the Texas market.
Sure, that makes sense.
Again, that's kind of an obvious one, guys. Now, I'm not saying that trucks don't sell well at any of our other auctions. They certainly do. But it's kind of looking at items like that. Some of it's where the vehicle is, just because the consigners in one of our markets, a lot of times the vehicles are maybe at a shop or another facility, so kind of looking at the transportation side of it. But then also saying just, again, and that's what our consignment team does, is provide some of that insight, saying, hey, even though you're in this market, we would suggest going over here. We think it'll do a little bit better. We will obviously always defer to what the customer wants, but again, we'll try to provide some insight and help just for them to get maximum exposure.
What defines the difference in the buying habits between, like, let's say a blip and a trend? Meaning, like, you know, is it a year's worth of data that you look at? You go, okay, well, this is a trend. Or is it 2 years worth? Meaning, like, you know, if some car just jumps out and grabs a big chunk of money beyond what anybody expected, how many, I guess, analytically do you guys go, okay, is this something emerging as something we're going to see more of, or what's maybe the ability to define that, if there is one?
Whew, man, that's a very insightful question. I think what I would say, Brian, is I would indicate what I do is you can look over past results. Of course, obviously that's the cold hard facts, right? And what I tell people is all of that data is available for viewers. If you go to Mecum.com, you create a free account and you can log in and you can see what cars have sold for at all of our auctions.
Okay.
So I will say, like, for what I look at, Brian, is I do try to identify certainly several repeated instances of that. Just because, you know, we will have high sellers of one category of car that we can't explain
It's the old adage, you get the two right guys in the room, right? The two
exactly.
You get the two correct people are in the room for that one car.
Yeah, and you know, as with any good statistician or journalist, you would never want to point out one instance of that happening and saying, oh, hey, you know,
Go-Go mobiles are going crazy next year.
Buy everyone you got. Go-Go mobiles. Yeah, that's, you know, or you know, Mercedes SLK, you know, 320s or through the roof because one sold for 35, whatever. But I would look at repeated instances to start to identify, you know, to plot on a chart and say, hey, this type of vehicle this category is trending upwards or is trending downwards. And that's really good data. Again, all of that is available on Mecum.com for people to check out and kind of do their own research to identify what's kind of hot and maybe what's cooling off.
What is if not the most common, what is a common question for a first-time consignor? What is the main I've never done this concern for first-time consignors, if there is one?
So someone who is new to the Mecum auction experience, bringing us a vehicle, I think there's probably several questions that come to mind. The first one would be is how does this work?
Right. Sure.
You know, depending on I mean, as you know, stepping back.
As
a process. Obviously, I think a lot of people are very familiar with our brand just because of the exposure that we've had with our TV program and just from Mecum Auctions being around for as many years as we have. So I think that there is an intimidation factor because they've watched us on TV for years and they come out and it can be a little intimidating. So I think that's kind of the most basic question is how does this work? You know, I've got a car, I'm ready to get rid of it. I need some space in the garage. What are next steps? And I would just say that that's where reaching out, getting in touch with a consignment agent, they will help answer all the questions. There's no dumb question. That's what I tell people who ask me this question. They say, hey, I want to bring a car. And I say, hey, I'll put you in touch. It's low pressure. There's no dumb question. You know, but a lot of it, I think, revolves around getting the car there, what happens on site.
Sure. Just the logistics of the entire thing.
of it, but I mean, a lot of it's very transparent. A lot of that information, if not all of it, is already up online at Mecum.com. We have a FAQ kind of section for people to find out more about it.
I was wondering too, dealing with expectations of customers, we talk about this a little bit at the magazine business, how TV auctions seem to have maybe driven prices of certain cars up maybe more than it would have had they not been on TV. So all of a sudden, everybody with like a 307 powered 71 Chevelle thinks they have a $90,000 car, right? and that's not always the case, is it?
Well, yeah, and I will say, because I see it too, like when I'm on social media and I see people screenshot, I know what I got. I know what I got. Right, exactly. It was funny. I saw some chatter recently, just because we were just in Kansas City, and I was on some third-gen Camaro pages, and I saw we had a couple high sellers, and I don't remember the specifics of the vehicles, but and I saw some chatter, people kind of indicating that about like, hey, our time has come, for the third gen is exploding.
Yeah. So I had that. I was sitting at work one day, and the monitors at work were showing a Mecum auction because of the partnership, and a C10 rolled across the auction block for a lot of money, and I'm like, oh my God, my C10's worth a fortune. My 67.
And then John lit up every C10 page with a pseudonym saying,
yeah.
And of course, that one looks nothing like mine, but
but here's the thing that cracks me up though, guys, is that to me, why is that an issue? Like, that's the thing that blows my mind, is that when I see chatter within the community about people, And I think it's one of those things too, guys, of because of our exposure of how large and how successful Mecum Auctions has been, because of how large our television network or broadcast goes, we are going to be the ones that people look to for setting the tone within the industry. So that's to be expected, right, guys?
Yeah.
The thing that I don't understand, though, is that when I see the sarcasm about like, why are those going up to me? I'm like, if you own one of those,
it's worth.
Why are you complaining?
Exactly.
Well, yeah,
Right.
and there's two sides of it. The two sides of it are whatever the numbskull with the 307 Chevelle 190 grand is asking for it is not what he's going to get for it.
Right,
Exactly.
of course.
And so
Yeah.
you have two sides of that where it's like, yeah, this guy's a schmo and he's asking way too much money for a car that's ultimately he's going to get what it's worth anyway, like the whole market kind of works on. But the mere idea that the auction world itself is driving all of these things to be more expensive, it isn't. I think the best examples of these cars have gotten more expensive as everything in our lives have gotten more expensive. I think 20 years ago, I don't think people looked at muscle cars in as much of as an investment property as they do now. And that's not a bad thing to me. I mean, if you're gonna invest in something, it's cool to invest in an awesome
Absolutely.
car.
Yeah.
So I think it's a more the natural course of business. But yeah, you're always gonna get some bird brain guy out there that is sitting on something that is just not worth what he thinks it is.
No, and I think, I understand the sentiment because again, like if there's someone who knows about some, some car tucked away in the garage down the street and they're waiting to go in and lowball that owner, I get it. They're going to be like, well, hey, Mecum is shining too bright a spotlight on how exciting the collector car market is. To me, I'm just like, I don't know, like. You find another hobby,
Right.
Where it's just like, to me, it's like, hey, we try to put on the best auctions, and we also try to put on the best television coverage of that. And it's just one of those where it's like, and I get it. We're always going to get comments from folks, and I tell them, I would say, come on out, see it in person, and other than that, I mean, just kind of enjoy the ride. And John, maybe your C10 will go up in value, and you can bring it to auction.
It's 3 different colors.
Three different
it's
colors.
Still a long bed, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
But they're all good colors.
Yeah.
It's 3 different good colors.
good.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
But I think it's just the extreme visibility, just because of how large we are, guys. That obviously that's going to command the conversation. So sure, I mean, we're going to get a lot of people who are saying, hey, this is exciting, and then we're going to get other people who are saying, oh man, I wish Mecum wouldn't do that because I want to buy this, I want to lowball the owner of this car that I know about, and I don't want them to know that they have a good deal. And it comes down to the auction process, like you said, Brian. I mean, all we do is we just present the opportunity for sellers to connect with buyers. That's all we do. We have cars roll across the block, and we put those people together. We provide the process. What happens is up to them.
And to a degree, it's a bit of a almost reverse flattery because when somebody makes these comments, they're effectively they're understanding or at least giving you guys a lot of credit. Right, it's one thing when they say, well, these auctions are driving the prices of cars up. Well, that means that these auctions are influential, good, giant events.
Yes.
So in a very
Yeah.
kind of backward way, it's almost a compliment to what you guys are doing.
Yeah, it is, and I think going off of your point though, John, I don't think I would say that the television aspect or the overinflates numbers. I don't. There's no. You could never. I don't think anyone can make that claim. I think it's just one of those that we're an auction company. We're the largest auction company out there for electric cars that has a great television broadcast.
Yeah.
And what happens. There's no overinflating or anything.
No,
like
what
that,
Brian
so.
said is right. It's the buyer. The people are willing to pay what they're willing to pay, and the enthusiasm around that sentiment fills up auditoriums like this.
I mean, ultimately, it'd be like if we were doing a podcast on. Early American art, and we blamed Antiques Roadshow
right, you
for
wouldn't say
driving up the prices of the paintings. I mean, that's
Yeah, exactly. So,
All right, so we got a few minutes left. Kissimmee's coming up. I know you got a few really unique cars here, so talk to us about some of the Highline Kissimmee offerings.
the automotive world is obviously watching with eager expectation for one of the main attractions, which is the Porsche 917. So, one of the most iconic race cars of all time. Purchased new by the legendary Steve McQueen, used in the production of his 1971 film Le Mans. Golf blue and orange. I don't know if there's a better.
No,
race
legitimately one of the
livery.
coolest cars.
Yeah.
No matter who owned it, I mean, the 917 Porsche is one of the coolest cars ever made.
Yeah.
We should walk around and do a survey here at a race convention and say, what's the best livery? And I think 9 out of 10 would say golf blue and orange.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a lot of attention on that. High profile ownership history. So a lot of excitement around that car. Kind of, but from there again, there's 4,999, or at least approaching that. We should be near, certainly over 4,000, but there's a lot out there. Some of the other cars that I'm watching, guys, we do have a lot of highly built muscle cars coming. That trend, speaking of trends or blips, is not going away anytime soon.
Right.
That custom or resto mod phase is not going going away.
Good. Good.
John says,
yeah, it's good for everybody in this building that makes the parts too.
Yeah. I don't know. We might. John's hoping for that 307 Chevelle trend to come back.
He wants it bad. He wants it bad. Two barrel.
But I will say, and I like that, guys, because just like you, having come off of SEMA, looking at what shops are doing and seeing it, I think it's exciting. We're nowhere. We haven't scratched the surface of what these builders can do with modern tech in classic looks.
Yeah.
And to me, that's exciting. I think the Hellcat conversion trend is not a blip. We're going to see a lot more of that coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
But outside of that, guys, what I look for at auction, just fun fact, I like the cars that the owner has done their due diligence in providing the story that goes with their car. Just like you, especially John, in your position as the editor, that's I think what a lot of what you're looking for is that the story behind the car.
Oh yeah, it's crucial.
It's crucial, and I will say, even at auction, guys, we get that, and I would say that's kind of a, I don't know if I'd say a myth, but I would say a word to the wise is that if you are bringing a car, do your diligence, because that does matter to an owner. There's stuff that you can do on your own. The family photos showing that car in the driveway, any kind of paperwork, and again, a consignment agent would work with them on that. But I love walking up and down the aisles of cars and seeing all of the literature, the provenance. It doesn't matter the caliber of car.
Correct.
But when an owner does that, I think it does add some value. You can't necessarily directly draw that line, but I think it would, because a lot of people wanting to own that car is buying the story, just like the 917.
Yeah, it's the same. I mean, it's exponentially larger, but it's the same thing where, if I love old historical, I collect a lot of old racing stuff, and it's like if I'm finding some gem on eBay or something and there's one photo of it, I move on, because this person hasn't given, it's the same thing. It's like, again, in a much larger scale, the more work that the seller puts into educating the potential buyer on what they're looking at, I mean, that's the type of thing that takes somebody that goes to maybe mildly interested in a car and puts it over the top, or it takes a guy who knows he's interested in it and he's going to bid an extra couple of ducats on the thing because now he really wants it because he understands the car just a little bit better. It puts everything over the top.
It does, and I will say there's some very simple steps. I mean, I think what will help you stand out as a consign or a seller is just go to Office Depot, go to any office store, buy, just like your high school, book report or whatever, but buy one of those binders, get some, sheets to put in there, and any paperwork related to the car. I know it sounds obvious, guys, but I can tell you I see it more often than not. And when I talk to the owners, a lot of times they're like, oh, I never thought of that. So I would just say that's a great way for success at an auction.
So is Kissimmee your favorite auction of the year?
Ooh, man, that's it's one of my favorites.
Okay, they're like children. You love them all.
We love them all. I will say, I mean, Kissimmee is one of my favorites, guys. John and I were talking off air about how starting off in January, it kind of kicks off the year with a bang, and it's a great place to be, especially for a lot of our Midwest customers to get out of the winter months, come down to Florida, take in some sun, some tropical vibes, and also the world's largest collector car auction. So that's great. I will say one of my other favorites is Glendale. We go out to the State Farm Stadium, and I will say that's a neat experience to be there. But I would recommend for people to check out Mecum.com. That might be another myth too, is understanding how far and wide our auctions are held around the country, because we almost have one every month of the year. And then on top of that, we also do the world's largest, one of the largest motorcycle auctions in January into February in Las Vegas. And that's a hoot too for people that are into two wheels. Come out to that. You'll see thousands of motorcycles. And talking about trends and blips, the thing that I'm seeing is with little Honda monkeys.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
The little pit bikes, man. Yeah. People are going crazy for those, so it's exciting to see, man. Always a ride.
The history of your company with Dana Mecum and his passion was rooted in auctions, but it was rooted in cars. Like, I think that's one of the things that people need to understand is Mecum is a very car first kind of company. I think that's one of the things I like about what you guys do is that so much of the passion is not simply in just the business side of moving these cars across an auction block, but it is that ability to showcase these things and put on a show for people and have them enjoy the cars in that environment.
The Mecum family is still actively involved in the business. You will see them at most auctions, I'm saying they are around, they're visible.
Yes.
They're still actively involved in what happens, which is exciting. But then also, like you identified, the Mecum staff, because of the enthusiasm that it takes to participate, we draw people that are excited to help, that we love cars, we love the auction process. So I will say that's fun too. And I think a lot of our people who come out, whether it be longtime bidders or customers or just spectators, are surprised to see how much passion is within the ranks of the team, the Mecum team that puts on these events. So that's exciting.
Man, it's been a pleasure to have you. It's been a pleasure to kind of walk through what this world is. That it's a world that a lot of us watch and are enthralled by, but don't necessarily understand. So I think you took us into a lot of different arenas and places that were definitely educational to me. Hopefully educational to the folks watching at home.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's been
Thank
fun,
you.
and I can't wait to see you guys at the next Mecum auction.
It is the Hot Rod Pod, where it all began. Presented by Mecum. These guys will be in Kissimmee, Florida very soon. If you're in that area, make sure you get down to the auction. Otherwise, go to the website and check out what they have going on. From my own personal experience, having visited their Indianapolis auction a few years ago, it is a car show on steroids, and you will be reaching for your wallet. I promise. We'll see you next time.